All right, let's discuss this more now with Robert Kelly, a professor of international relations at Busan National University. He joins me live from Busan. Professor, I've been to South Korea a few times, and my impression was always that is very orderly there, particularly in Seoul. So when I heard about this happening Saturday night, it seemed like it's something that wouldn't happen there. I mean, as horrific as it is, no matter where it would take place. But I'm wondering what's been the reaction there? How's this all being seen within South Korea? Is this being seen as just an abject failure on the part of authorities?
Yeah, I think first is the shock that you mentioned, right? I mean, South Korea is actually pretty good about these things. The South Korean state is actually quite effective at things like public administration and crowd management and infrastructure and things like that. Korea has a very low crime rate. I'm an American, and Korea is much, much safer than it is in the United States at night in sort of dark areas and things like that. So this kind of thing is really rare, which is why you're seeing this sort of huge outpouring, right? It's not just sort of the grief of the death, but it's also the shock that this kind of thing doesn't happen very much in a society that's actually quite well regulated, and sort of Koreans really follow the rules, for example, on mask wearing during COVID. And so now there's sort of, like you said, this search for blame, and it looks like this is beginning to fall on the police, right? This sort of lack of crowd control. And again, this is where I think your correspondent there a moment ago was quite good, actually, which is that this is a little bit normal and not normal, because the Korean police are actually quite good at managing protests and have done so in the past, right? So I think there's going to be, that's where probably the focus of the investigation will be, right? Why, when Koreans have managed political protests, for example, really well a few years ago, when there were millions of people on the streets protesting a president who got impeached, why did that fail around something as mundane as a holiday celebration?
Yeah, South Korean authorities say they had no guidelines to handle the huge crowds, but it was only just weeks earlier at a concert by BTS in Busan, where you are, was manned by 2,700 security officers compared to only 137 who were there in Seoul Saturday night. Is that just a flimsy excuse? Does that make it look worse for them?
Yeah, and that's also that's actually a great point. That's actually the fault line that's really sort of emerging here. And the police response has been that, well, BTS was an organized thing. We knew what it was. We had preparation that were going to be, whatever, 100 or 200,000 people there, and we could prepare for it. This was not really prepared for. This was sort of spontaneous. This was just sort of Halloween, right? There is kind of a cultural argument that's been thrown around. Well, Halloween's not a Korean event anyway. It's sort of this American import, so the police weren't really ready. Right. I mean, all that is kind of dancing around the edges, right? Which is that, the police probably should have been out there in greater numbers. They had, in fact, actually been out in greater numbers in this area, Itaewon, in previous holidays. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. I think that's a lot of it. I think also, to a certain extent, it's known that Itaewon has actually had narrow alleys. I actually know the alley where this occurred, and it was actually pretty narrow. I recall from the times I've been up there myself. And people have talked about the fact that Itaewon was sort of a trouble spot waiting to happen, that the alleys were too narrow and too many people came out on the weekends.
Hmm. How do you think authorities are likely to proceed? Do you think they'll pin the blame on one particular person, for example, or we likely to see major changes take place?
You're probably going to see more aggressive crowd control for events. You'll see organizers required for events, things like, I don't know, like fireworks displays or marathons or something like that. Organizers will be required probably to submit guesses about how many people they expect to come, submit those earlier, in order to organize with police, with mayor's offices and things like that, in order to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And it looks like increasingly there's going to be a focus on the local police department for that particular area of Seoul. It's called Yongsan, and there's going to be a big debate about whether or not that policing that department should be staffed up. And part of that is because the presidential office has actually moved to that area of Seoul, which is another sort of variable that's sort of floating around back there. There's another argument that says, well, the president moved into this area and now the police are overstretched and there weren't enough of them. But, I mean, this kind of thing, it's pretty, Itaewon has been a known issue for a while. So I'm not entirely sure if all the blame should fall on the cops. I mean, it would be nice if Itaewon was less congested. People have known for decades, since Itaewon became sort of hot as a place to go to on the weekends. It's been known for a while that it was sort of trouble in the making.
All right, we'll leave it there. Robert Kelly joining us from Busan, South Korea. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.